just turn the recorder on. Here are my thoughts. There's a theory that just came out here recently from, I'll think of his name in a minute. The theory is that this was a Jewish apocalypse and that the interpolations came from Christians much later on. And James Tabor, I think, on his blog, he actually breaks the whole thing down, and he tries to show us the interpolations. The second thing is that this book was disputed. The earlier canons, with the exception of the Sinaitic, didn't have it. The earliest canons, Sinaitic and Vaticanus did, I believe, but the other ones did not have it, or they had something altered in it. Again, one way that is helpful for people like us to figure out a question like that is, it's a lot of work, but to take and parse the thing and put the pieces together with other pieces. Like, for instance, tonight I'm going to use the 144,000. We're going to put that together, all the pieces together. We see that it makes a unified whole. So what I'm thinking is that if we do it that way, then we're going to be able to see at least the parts that were either interpolated or original. I don't know which yet, because you're going to have all the various topics put together in one place. You can kind of see what's left over. But because of the dispute of the book, who really knows? It's a mysterious thing. All this is mysterious. But one thing we do know that's really interesting to me is that Revelation and Josephus' Wars are theorized to come out at the same time. And there's such numerous parallels with wars that it's, well, if you know Revelation and you read through the Jewish wars, you're going to see them all over the place, all over the place. But that's about all I can tell you about that, other than there are some atypical things about this book. But that's not to say that most of the books of the New Testament aren't like this as well. They're full of interpolations. And you wonder whether this was, if this book is anointed, or sorry, I'm a little slow. The word I'm looking for is authentic there. If this is authentic the way it is, and if Elohim had something to do with that, then you'll take the theory like Presbyterians do and say, well, the God-given text is the Stephanus 1550 version, and we're going to believe that whatever's in the 1550 Greek New Testament, hold on a sec, is God breathed, and we're not even going to look at any other ones before that. So that, we're talking about a text that the Stephanus is got pieces and bits of a huge number of manuscripts before it. But then again, since 1550, a lot have come out, including the oldest New Testament we have is a Sinaiticus that's complete. And I've got that Sinaiticus version. I need to look at that and see what's in there and what's not.
Well, yeah, and that's even 340 to 350 AD, which is post 325.
Yes,
and it does have Revelation in it.
Now remember, though, when something is dated at a certain time, that does not mean it was written at that time. It's just that they have a copy that they are
Sure,
guessing.
that's the earliest, that we can put on it.
They use paleography to guess when those dates are. Sinaiticus, I would put it before Nicaea, because it includes books that none of those canon lists have, like Epistle of Barnabas, Shepherd of Hermas, Didache. And I'm thinking that if that was after 325, then they'd take those books out.
Well, the canon wasn't discussed in 325, just the doctrine that was
Yeah.
going to form the later canon.
Well, I think it was discussed in the back rooms because, you know, the next council, next 2-3 councils, this came out in spades.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, give us some information on that next time, will you? You're assigned.
Sure, I will.
Let us know. Do you want to see notes or not? Or do you want to chew tobacco or something? You want to see notes? Okay, they're kind of messed up, but we'll look at them anyway. All right, for a little review, we've looked at several chapters and pieces of chapters and pericopes in the past 4 times we've been together. And just a couple things to review that are very important for what we're going to get into now is in chapter 1, the reiteration, and chapter 2 and 3. The reiteration over and over again is, I'm coming soon, or I'm coming like a thief, or I'm coming quickly, or I'm coming suddenly. And I know that futurists try to get over that somehow. They try to say, well, it's not quickly, it means suddenly, but the word means quickly or soon. And thousands of years is not soon. We have to also remember in chapter 1 that it's reiterated that those who have pierced him will see him and they'll gnash their teeth. Where are those people today? They're dead. People, when they die, they're dead, except if they're the saints. The saints, according to the Gospels, don't die, period. But if they're not the saints, they're going to die. And in 70 AD, these people were still alive. And so we get a clue there again that this is not for some vast future time, but rather in a time very close to that which the writers are writing. Find that in the Olivet Discourse too. Olivet Discourse seems to be the witness or testimony of Yeshua that we find written up in Revelation, because the Olivet Discourse, especially the Matthew version, follows the war very, very closely. And in there again, Yeshua is talking about how soon it's going to happen, and suddenly, as though it were going to happen within their lifetime. Paul again too in 1st and 2nd Thessalonians says the same thing in his apocalyptic passages there. He's expecting something to happen, and he was close to Rome. I think he knew exactly what was going on. He might even been kind of a foil for it because of the fact that his letters to the Corinthians and Romans and a few more were in the hands of Nero and Poppea through Seneca, his guardian. And in those books, he mentions a lot of people's names, people that we can identify yet today. We went to chapter 17 and 13. In 13, we identified the beast through the name and several other things. The beast is always going to be, well, I would say the Roman Empire's power, or even armies, who are fueled by the devil. And that first beast in 13, we found through, again, the name and the tax stamp, the mark of the beast, that land beast is faced by Nero. Nero is the face on it. The second beast in there, the sea beast, is also faced by Nero. There's the face on the beast is Nero. And the two horns are Vespasian and Titus, father and son, the generals that actually went down and with their armies and in a pincer movement conquered all of Palestine and destroyed everything. It was scorched earth. It was shock and awe of that day. And there's really never been another war like that, considering how early it was and the amazing siege engines and catapults that Rome had. We get a look at some of the art that was done about that. We see, you know, maybe catapult here and a siege engine there, but there were hundreds and hundreds of them. Josephus says that for 11 furlongs around Jerusalem, there was not a tree. Revelation at different times talks about trees, cutting down trees. And Romans cut every tree down there they could to use for these engines and for their various camps and forts there. So trees were really scarce at that time. Chapter 17, we looked at the whore of Babylon. And what I see that as being is a religious system of sacrifices and idols. Because this whore is covered with blood, drunk with the blood of the saints. It's a composite representing Jerusalem and Rome together. We can't really pull one city out from another in the imagery we have there, but it's obvious that the writer's talking about both of these cities as being representative of the whore. And of course, Paul and some others talk about Jerusalem as a type of Sodom, Peter a type of Babylon. Martyr's blood, and they're destined to burn. Rome, both Rome and Jerusalem were burning just about the same time. And in chapter 17, the 8 rulers there, heads, works up perfectly in the descriptions that we have in Revelation 17 of these heads, starting with Augustus. He was the first Roman emperor. Tiberius, Caligula 3, Claudius 4, Nero 5, Vespasian 6, Titus 7, who would just stay a short time, and Domitian the 8th. Domitian and Titus were brothers, of course, and it talks about a relationship there as one having the other, and Domitian going to perdition at the end. The other kings that are mentioned in that passage are also the provinces that led their tribes of armies into the Roman Empire to fight this war. 10 of them. I'm going to skip this little bit here, maybe come back to it. Oh, maybe some of these passages. Yeshua told him, you said it, I'm telling you then that henceforth you shall see the Son of Man sitting from the right hand of the power and coming over the clouds of the sky. The Son of Man, we can't understand what that legendary name means unless we have the book of Enoch. In Enoch, there are numerous, well, a whole section called the parables of Enoch that tell us exactly what the Son of Man is. It's a powerful intermediary between the heavenly powers and the earth. You just have to read the parable section of First Enoch in order to understand what the Son of Man is, and understand that Yahshua called himself that more than any other title, almost exclusively. Behold, he shall come as clouds, and his chariot shall be as the whirlwind. That's a prophecy from Jeremiah 4:13. Remember from last week that on the ground at this time, people, well, maybe as many as 2 million, witnessed armies in the sky and prodigies and lights shining down like on the altar. And they heard the sounds of battle up in the sky. And Josephus calls it a portent, a sign. And I believe here that the Revelator says the same thing. And I read Josephus last time concerning these prodigies, but Tacitus was a heathen. He was a Roman historian that lived near that time. His work is great. If you're interested in this at all, Tacitus, you gotta read it or listen to it. He says prodigies had occurred, but their expiation by the offering of victims or solemn vows is held to be unlawful by a nation which is the slave of superstition and the enemy of true beliefs. As I said, he was a pagan. And one of the infractions that those in the temple were doing at this time, even through the battle, was sacrificing animals to the emperor or for the emperor. And this is one of the things that even led up to the war, because those who were zealous for the Torah knew this was wrong, that it was not right to do this, but the temple crowd got some, what do they call them? Benefits, got some benefits from this, because they couldn't even sacrifice without the Romans, because the Romans had their robes in the Antonian Tower there beside the temple. And if they wanted their robes to do their worship, they had to go over there and check them out. And they could only do it in their robes. So Romans had a monopoly on that. And so we have evidence of not only unclean animals being cut up through the first century in there, but also human sacrifices, as the Holy of Holies was chock full to the ceiling with rotting corpses. If that's not a desolation, I don't know what is. In the sky appeared a vision of armies in conflict, of glittering armor. A sudden lightning flash from the clouds lit up the temple. The doors of the holy place abruptly opened. A superhuman voice was heard to declare that the gods were leaving it. And in the same instant came the rushing tumult of their departure. Few people placed a sinister interpretation upon this. The majority were convinced that the ancient scriptures of their priests alluded to the present as the very time when the Orient would triumph and the Judea would go forth men destined to rule the world. That comes from the Balaam prophecy in Numbers 16 maybe, where a star would arise and from Judea and would rule the earth. Josephus used that prophecy to save his life by applying it to the general Vespasian who had captured him. Vespasian held him forth, imprisoned him instead of killing him right there to see if that would come true. And when it did come true, the empire hailed Josephus as a prophet and set him up in Rome for life and gave him the opportunity to take on the emperor's name, Flavius. So that's why we call him Flavius Josephus today. Joshua says there will be terrors and great signs from the sky, Luke 21, Luke's version of the Olivet. You said it. I'm telling you then that henceforth you shall see the Son of Man sitting from the right of the power and coming over the clouds of heaven. That's from the Aramaic Bible, but something that I discovered that is, again, I'll repeat it, that is so interesting to me. I kind of blew my mind when I was reading it in the Greek. The word clouds in the plural is Nephilim. Nephilim. How can that be? Well, maybe they're trying to say he's coming with Nephilim. Not necessarily are Nephilim bad, but they are angelic beings that really have a bad rap because of the writings in Enoch about them falling from heaven. I just don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. Maybe you can. Jeremiah, Isaiah 66, for behold, Yahweh will come with fire and with his chariots like a whirlwind to render his anger and fury and his rebuke with flames of fire. Again, they saw this battle going up, and while that was going up in the sky, all these balls, huge stones with pitch and fire on them, were coming down by the hundreds inside of Jerusalem, terrorizing people. And I think I mentioned that the lookouts at the temple and in Jerusalem on the walls, when they saw one coming, they would shout out, "Here comes the sun!" So maybe there was a mistake here in the Jewish war, because the word there is huios, which doesn't mean S-U-N. Huios means son, like father and son. See, they couldn't see him when they took the fire out of them, they couldn't see those balls anymore flying in, especially at night. So they had lookouts to check that thing out. I want to go through Revelation 14 quickly. Then I saw another angel flying in the mid-heaven with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth or the land, to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear Elohim and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who has made heaven and the earth, the sea, and the fountains of water." Another indication that the day of the Lord, the day of Yahweh, had come, that had been prophesied in virtually all the Old Testament prophets, that one day would come called the day of the Lord, when this whole system in Jerusalem would be destroyed by the wrath of Yahweh for their unfaithfulness. He seems like he put it off and put it off and put it off, but when it came, it came. And there hasn't been a temple there since that time. Another angel, a second followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of her impure passion." Babylon the Great, of course, is personified, and also personified as the whore of Babylon, full of blood. Here's the third angel followed, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also shall drink of the wine of Elohim's wrath, poured unmixed into the cup of his anger, and he shall be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb." This is exactly what was happening in Jerusalem. The place was not only packed in, they couldn't get out, but it was burning down because of all the sulfur and brimstone and Greek fire that they were throwing in there all the time. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day or night, these worshipers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. He's not talking about Romans here. He's talking about Judahites. And I want to show you an interpretation coming up here that I've never seen any other place. It's something that just seems absolutely remarkable that has something to do with this. And it'll be controversial. Here's a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of Elohim and the faith of Yeshua. And if you can hear this, these are the prototypes of the two witnesses, starting right at the very first verse of the first chapter. The commandments of Elohim and the faith or witness of Yeshua. That witness, I believe, is the Olivet Discourse. Excuse me. "And I heard a voice from the sky saying, write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Master henceforth." Interesting, because of what happens in this next chapter. "Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them." Revelation is all about works. It is all about works righteousness. These people followed the Lamb. Well, we'll get to that. "Then I looked, and lo, a white cloud, a Nephil, and seated on the cloud one like a son of man, with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand." He's going to reap. "An angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth or the land is ripe." Remember, when we have this word earth in Revelation, that's a mistranslation. It should say land. The word in Greek is ge. The word in Hebrew is eretz. It's talking about the land or the greater Israel, not about the whole earth. This has nothing to do with Japan. "So he who sat upon the cloud swung his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped." Who's sitting on the cloud? Is this a holy one? Is this Messiah? And who is being reaped? This is a big mistake by most teachers that do preterism. I don't claim to do preterism because I didn't study preterism. I just read Josephus and Revelation, I want you to know. So I don't know what they believe. I do know they believe in supersessionism, at least a lot of them do, and I certainly don't believe in that. But somebody is reaping, and we got to know what they're reaping. Somebody holy is reaping something that is foul. My theory is here, it's not Romans they're reaping. They're using Romans to reap during the day of Yahweh, the day of gloom, where the sun darkens, moon turns to blood. This is a time of retribution that people are looking for now to be poured out on this country. This is one of the reasons I want to find these things out, because why would he be pouring wrath out on this country? What do we have to do with any of this? Not much. But I think there's always the need for some power plays in religion in order to keep people scared or interested or in line, especially in the church. Then another angel came out from the altar, the angel who has the power over fire, and he called with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, "Put in your sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." These are the grapes of wrath, not the holy grapes. Something else happens with them. And so an angel swung his sickle in the earth and gathered the vintage of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of Elohim. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia. We'll get back to these numbers sometime later. I want to get right on now that I read that, 14, because here's another of many, many parallelisms between 5 and 14 that to understand, we've got to read them together. If we read them in a straight line or in chronological order, I shouldn't say chronological, but in chapter order, it looks like this is going on and on and on, but there are plenty of parables taking right now, or parallels taking right now the seals. We've got seals, assemblies, trumpets, bowls, blessings. And if you put all those things in an array, 1, 2, 3, you're going to find some excellent similarities. There's going to show you that this is written in a Hebraic way with these parallels, and that it's not going to be like seals, trumpets, bowls. It all happens. We've got seals being pulled and then trumpets happening and bowls like that. And I didn't explain that very good. But here's 5. And I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. First of all, what is this scroll? It's the scroll of the penalties upon an unfaithful people that had been given every advantage, but was ungrateful, and prophesied that this would eventually happen. And that's why this is rolled into the scroll. But who's worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? Of course, nobody was able to do that in heaven or on earth or under the earth. Who's under the earth? Is the earth hollow? Sure. There's a lake of fire in the center of the earth. And the Enoch literature tells us there are great big abysses in the ground that hold fallen angels and like types of creatures that, if they were let out, they would destroy the whole earth and all the saints in it. And I wept much that no one was found worthy to open the scroll or look into it. Now, you know what kind of horrors come out of this scroll. Horrible, horrible things. Why did he weep much? It was because He wanted to see the will of Yahweh to be done. And if nobody can open it, it's not like opening a package of ding-dongs or something like that. This is horrible things that are going to be set loose on this particular place. But the promise is that certain ones would be sealed for it. So while they're sealing up in order to unseal now, weep not, lo, the Lion of the tribe of Yehudah, the root of David, is conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. Of course, this is the Son of Man, the Son of Elohim. And between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, we're referring back to chapter 4 again in the big worship scene in the sky, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of Elohim sent out into all the earth. Here's a gentle lamb being slain, yet having 7 horns. That means the completeness of power. Completeness of power. And 7 eyes, here's explained, the 7 spirits of Elohim. And this lamb, of course, is Yahshua. In fact, this book is called The Revelation of Yahshua HaMashiach to Yochanan, or the Hazon in Hebrew. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. That's from the Father, Yahweh himself. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down again before the Lamb. I suspect they had a lot of bruised knees. They fall down so many times. Each one of these is holding a lyre or a harp, and with golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. I outlined prayers of the saints because as we go through here, prayers of the saints, blood of the saints, are going to be very important. And they sang a new song saying, Thou art worthy, you know that song. Thou art worthy, worthy thou art to take the scroll and open its seals, for thou wast slain, and by thy blood didst ransom men for Elohim. I do a show on the ransom. It's a doctrine that we have just about lost these days. A life for a life, a good life for a good life, and one being ransomed for many. You know, at this time, there were lots of kidnappings going on, lots of ransoming going on. Julius Caesar himself was kidnapped by pirates and ransomed. He told the pirates, this is so usual. If you got on the sea, you're going to be kidnapped. He told the pirates that when I get out of here, the ransom's paid, and I get out of here, I'm coming back. And sure enough, he came back and wiped them all out once he got out. I think it was in captivity for 2 years. And they sang a new song. We did that. Slain, blood of Messiah. From every tribe and tongue and people and nation. This is the great multitude we're going to get into in chapter 6 or 7, I mean. And hast made them a kingdom and priests to our Elohim, and they shall reign where? On earth. This is not a reign up in the sky someplace. This is not a reign in heaven someplace. This is a reign on the earth. Later on in the book, we find out how this is possible for these saints and priests to reign, because there is, as we just mentioned, there is a mid-heaven or a mid-sky. There's 3 perspectives here, really. High sky or heaven, mid-sky, and on the surface of the earth. Those perspectives do come in later on, again, as we take a look at the parallelism between seals, trumpets, and bowls. Then I looked and heard around the throne and the living creatures and the elders the voices of many angels, numbering myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands. Sing with a loud voice. And here's the song again. And we've got, this is the sevenfold to the fourfold blessing. Power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. That's the sevenfold blessing. And I heard every creature in the sky and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all therein saying, to him who sits upon the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. And there's the fourfold blessing. I wonder why they didn't include under the earth with this one. They made it perfectly clear before there were beings under the earth, but I doubt very much if those beings would be singing this song. Then the four living creatures said, Amen. In those days, in the early assemblies, everything ended with Amen in worship, which means something like, so be it. You know, in the King James Bible, Yahshua says, truly, truly, truly. Well, the word behind that is Aramaic, and it's Amen. Let it be. And if you read early Christian literature from the first few centuries, you find that the Amen is very important. It's like the seal upon a power act. It's used throughout those Christian traditions and historical documents as a pause time. It's almost like a Selah in the Psalms. Selah, of course, meaning pause. Now we're going to get down to something here. Revelation 6 and the seven seals, finally. Now I saw the Lamb. He opened one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the living creatures say, as with the voice of thunder, go. Well, we did this last week, but we didn't go into detail on it. Now here is the part I was telling you about that I think they all have it wrong. Behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. Well, of course, this represents conquest. One of four different representations here that are coming up with the first four seals. We go to 1911. Then I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat upon it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges, and he makes war. It's important to find out who this one is in 19. And we find out his eyes are like a flame of fire, his head are many diadems, crowns. And he has a name inscribed that no one knows but himself. That's pretty sure today. Nobody knows. He is clad in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of Elohim. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in white linen, white and pure, followed him on white horses. Who is this horseman? It seems pretty clear it's Yahshua, but these prophecy teachers say it can't be Yahshua. It can't be the same. So this first white horse that represents conquest is something different. But to me, this parallel tells us exactly who it is. And I've heard time after time when I was younger that really what it meant was Yahshua on the horse with the everlasting gospel riding out and conquering with the gospel. But look at 1914. The armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, followed him on white horses for conquest. Of course, you know who those are on the horses with him, because they end up on the top of Mount Zion, overlooking Jerusalem, and are part of overseeing this war against the Israelites. Again, Habakkuk Yahweh talks about who his army is. The Assyrian army and the Babylonian army. He's not talking about the Israeli army. And in Joel, They march on the city. They climb up the wall or something. Great is the army that carries forth his word. We say, oh, that's the Christians, Christian soldiers. But it explains there, if you read the whole thing, that these are not believers that are in the army, that other armies, heathen armies, are directed. And it's my understanding, along with some other things that come along here, is that this is Joshua, and he's got his own army, and he's not fighting for Israel. Recently I read this in another commentary, which you got to know, I don't read commentaries very often because I don't believe them. I have to find out. You have to find out by yourself if you got the skills to do that. But let's see, what did that say? Oh, yeah. It said that this couldn't be Yeshua because he was fighting on the side of Israel. It's perfectly clear through the rest of this that he is not. And not only that, but those that are into this book are so brainwashed by that idea that it's really hard to consider that maybe Yeshua is portraying Yahweh Tzaviot, the master of hosts and armies. Indeed, we find out that that's exactly what he's doing here. He has an army to conquer. And in that conquering, it's full of blood. So we have the first horse, conquest, Yeshua riding forth. We assume that the other white horses are with them because we already read that in 19. And we'll learn here what happens to them pretty soon. Conquest comes first. When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, the word there is zon. It means something with life. Go! And out came another horse, bright red, and its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that men should slay one another. And he was given a great sword. We find a parallel here in chapter 19:15. From his mouth issues a sharp sword with which to smite the nations, and he'll rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of Elohim, the Almighty. This in 19 is speaking of Yeshua. And here, it's speaking of the same person. There's too much indication here and in the Old Testament for it to be anything else. So following conquest is war. Notice that's a red horse. Red, the color of war, the color of Mars. Mars being I think it's the Roman god for war. Who was the Greek god? Aryans? Ares. Well, one or the other. Then we have the third seal being opened by the Lamb. I heard the third living creature say, go. And I saw and behold a black horse, and its rider had a balance in his hand. I don't think this is Yeshua anymore. He's never portrayed as black. But this is symbolic of famine. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst from 19, and the four living creatures saying, 5, 6, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, but do not harm oil and wine. Extraordinary high prices. What they were eating in Jerusalem proper in these days were grass, dried grass, dirty hay, leather off shoes, and infants, because there was nothing there. The 3 powers on the inside of Jerusalem, locked in there, had tried to get the people to fight, and so they burned all the grain supplies after keeping plenty for themselves, thinking that now they'll have to fight. those powers inside Jerusalem had guards right outside the wall. See, outside the Jerusalem walls, Titus had a great idea. I got to keep people from getting out of here. So I'm going to put another wall, a wooden wall, around this entire city. Down came the trees. In short order, they built a wall all around that city. And in that space in between, the wooden wall and the wall of Jerusalem, people would try to sneak out there at night, trying to find little pieces of something to eat or dig up some herbs or grasses. The people that were from the inside powers were waiting in the dark. And what they would do when they came back in, the people that are out scavenging came back in, the masters of their rulers would take what little bit they had and kill them. That simple. So this was a reign of terror inside Jerusalem. I've heard so many people describe that inside Jerusalem, this was a righteous war, and that they were all in one accord, and they were serious about the Torah, and oh, these poor Israelites. But that's not what's portrayed at all. Rather, they're in there for a purpose, and that purpose, whether like it or not, was to be destroyed on the day of Yahweh. I think, did I stop at 15? Sharp sword, yeah. On his robe and on his thigh, that's a translation error there, it should be banner. He had a name inscribed, kind of like he had a tattoo on his thigh. Sovereign of sovereigns and master of masters, or King of kings and Lord of lords. Last time we talked of 666 and what that stood for. If you take the consonants from these words in Hebrew and Greek, you come up with 777. So there is a great contrast here between 666, the mark of the beast, and 777, the King of kings and Lord of lords. And you open up the third seal. And the third Zoon said, "Go." And I saw and behold a black horse. Oh, we got that one already. I forgot to tell you about the oil and the wine. You could still be buying a little barley or even some wheat, but inside the city, it was exorbitant. And the people outside the city had been devastated. What was left of them had been sent into slavery. Into captivity you go, says the scripture. When it comes to harming the oil and the wine, that's hard to figure out. How are you going to harm them or touch them, we'll say. They couldn't touch the oil in the wine because there wasn't any. These were the two staples of Israel, oil and wine. But the Romans had taken over all those oil presses, all those vineyards, all of them were in their hands, and all of that was producing great under the hands of the Romans, but it was all being sent to Rome, every drop of it. So when it says don't harm or don't touch, depending on your translation, the oil and wine, it's simply that there was none to be gotten. It was all going to Rome. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Go." And I saw and behold a pale, or actually in Greek it's choris, green horse. Green, the color of pas, the color of detritus, the color of, oh, what is that you get if your skin is rotting? I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember much of anything anymore, but that's all right.
Leprosy.
What is it? Gangrene. Gangrene. Its writer was Death, and Hades followed him. Significant. This writer is bringing Hades along. Hades is, of course, the Greek god of the underworld, but in other literature, like Second Enoch talks about Hades being the fifth heaven. The fifth heaven. Christian doctrine is real wacky about this. Hades. In fact, I read in a Presbyterian systematic theology that Jesus is in Hades right now. That Hades is split in half. One side is paradise, where all the righteous go, and the other side is hell. That is really strange. But we read exactly what this means in Second Enoch, because we're talking about here the fifth heaven, which is a hole in the ground lined with rocks and covered over, holding the Nephilim. So this is the death. And if you got these people that are filled with Nephilim spirits, or these lizards, which I believe in very much. I've got a recording for you from Scott Peck, the late psychiatrist, who talks about the serpentines that he met, who he calls Satan, in certain people during exorcisms. It's chilly. I just recorded it. I want you to hear it. Four horsemen: conquest, war, famine, death. That's exactly the order that they came in Israel. As the Romans went down, they took down a third of the trees, then 2/3 of the trees and everything with it, and all these things hailed after it. Poisoned the wells, as I said, left the rivers full of blood. They were given power over a fourth of the land to kill the sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and with wild beasts of the earth, therioi. As I mentioned, Vespasian and Titus came in from two different sides in the north, one in Gamla, the other in Ptolemais. And they came and gathered together their armies in the middle and just came straight down. So this is an indication now that at this time, they're down a fourth of the land, down there to probably about the border of Samaria, or in the southern border of the Galilee. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the suitcase of those who had been slain for the word of Elohim and for the witness they had borne. Soul is not the eternal soul. That's an untrue doctrine, as you know. Soul simply means being, all that a person is, and soul in this sense, suke, means not only the mind but the body too. In Hebraic thought, there's only mind and body, and they're both. In Hebraic thought, we're not three in one. We're just one in one. We're one in one. When it says he breathed into the nephesh and he became a living soul, the understanding of that is he became a living being, some translate it that way, that is united together as a unit, not separable. So when the soul dies, the body dies. When the body dies, the soul dies. Not so in Greek thought. There are three: body, soul, and spirit. Fifth seal, here's the altar: the souls who have been slain for the word of Elohim and for the witness they bore. Here's two witnesses again, the word of Elohim and the witness. And they cried out from under the altar with a loud voice, O sovereign master, holy and true, how long before thou wilt judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell upon the land? Understand that this is symbolic here. I don't think that they're is an altar in that respect, in that they're under the altar. They're trying to bring something forth here, that these saints who have been martyred are not dead. They're not dead, but they're someplace for the time being in order to fulfill the revelator's job here of bringing forth this message. And look what they're looking for: vengeance and judgment on those who dwell in Israel. They're not talking about Romans. It wasn't the Romans that were necessarily killing them. It was the Jews that were killing them, and especially the Jews that were Hellenists. Josephus also talks about all the civil wars in these cities, that the Greeks and the Jews would get in these pitched battles inside their cities, and they would fight until nobody was left but one side. We read about that in Antioch, where Paul and Barnabas and those guys supposedly were. We read about it in Caesarea, which is the capital for the Romans and Greeks. And we hear about it in Sepphoris, which just outside of there is Nazareth, that there were wars there among the people in the town, and the Jews never won. These people in these towns were Nazarenes. They were Nazarenes. They were considered to be heretics, baby eaters, blood eaters, atheists. They're calling out for vengeance, and look what they get: given a white robe. Who else had a white robe? Well, Yeshua has a white robe. We suspect it was linen. We've seen what's left of the robes from Qumran, linen, ticked linen, actually. And they're told to rest longer. What about that army on horses we talked about a little earlier? Weren't they in white robes? But they had to wait until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. They're to be killed. The saints are to be killed. And who kills them? Well, I'm sure the Romans got some, but they wouldn't fight. They would not fight. I've written historical fictional story about this, being in Jerusalem as a Nazarene in the middle of this war, and some miraculous occurrences that may have happened there, but also that they were being killed. And as last week we talked about Bar Kokhba, who in his own letters said to get rid of these people because they wouldn't fight. When he opened the sixth seal, I look and behold, there was a great earthquake. That's reported. The sun became black as sackcloth, and full moon became like blood, exactly like the prophecy concerning the day of the Lord in Hosea. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as the fig tree sheds its winter fruit when shaken by a gale. If you know a little about prophetic imagery, figs, stars, anything falling to the earth can also mean the powers are falling. We're certainly not talking about the literal stars. We certainly could be talking about rockets. They were falling all over. And the sky vanished like a scroll that's rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place, coming right from the prophecies. Directly from the day of the Lord prophecies, the day of judgment on Jerusalem and the land. Then the kings of the earth and the great men and the generals and the rich and the strong, let's see how many, kings, great men, generals, hegemon, rich, strong, 5, everyone, slave and free. That's sixfold. When we get into numbers, we'll see why that's important. They hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And wouldn't you know it, this is exactly what they did in Jerusalem proper, not to mention the rest of the country. When it was getting down to the last battle, all these great men of Jerusalem, they had dug themselves holes inside Jerusalem, hoping to tunnel out of there. Josephus himself was down in a sewer when he was caught. Saddam Hussein was in a hole when he was caught. And of course, we've got those Sicarii out at Masada and in the caves out there. We do have accounts of this during the Second Revolt. Letters from people that stayed in those caves trying to avoid being killed by the Romans. Caves among the rocks and the mountains, calling on the rocks and mountains, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Somebody has to understand that we today are in a war. In a war. People that just say, oh, we have to pray about this. You know, prayer changes things. Oh, we can't do anything of any violence. Oh, we can't even appear evil. Yahweh is a man of war. And his Messiah, as portrayed in apocalypses, is also a man of war. And we need to be men and women of war in our white, in on our horses, and get ready for whenever the call comes, not to kill people, I don't think, but if he would give us that order, then we would. Or we would fall away. We have to be prepared. I guess some pray, some do. I don't know for sure. But like Nehemiah's group, we need to be shoveling with one hand and the sword in the other. We have to, especially against the demonic attacks of today. For the great day of the wrath has come, and who can stand before it? How can you read this any other way? We might as well just admit it. Let me look at chat just a second. Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you. It's like when I go through here, things come back to me. And besides, this is a little more detailed than in the past. But here's the big chapter, 7. And I do want to go through this, and it'll take maybe 10, 15 minutes. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth. We read this last week. However, in verse 3, the command is, don't harm the earth or the land or the sea or the trees till we have sealed the slaves. I don't know why in the New Testament they don't just translate what the word is. Dula, slave, not diakona, that's servant. Slaves of our Elohim upon their forehead. So they're going to get something here. All those who have been sealed. And now we're going to hear who's been sealed. These are the slaves of Elohim. They're going to be sealed with the Tau, like in Ezekiel chapter 9, I'm guessing again. I still didn't look that up. They're going to be sealed by the Tau. It just so happens that the Tau is also a letter in Greek. That letter is chi, C-H-I, or Chi. And that stands for Christos. So they're getting a mark of their own on the forehead. And here they are sealed, 144,000. That's 12 elders times 12 prophets times 1,000 years. And are these Jews? No, they're not, with one exception. Maybe the Judeans are, but the rest of these are plumb out Israel. Is this for the future? If we look at this as in its context, no. Are you going to be in the 144,000? No. You might be robed in white. You might be on your white horse. You might have a bow and arrow in your hand. But these guys have already passed. And what happened to them? Well, we learned. These are the saints, the hagioi, the holy ones. They have to die. If you're alive now, you're not one of these. And if you're alive now, you've not only escaped death then, but you've also lived an awful long time. That's how I say I'm in the 144,000. Well, you might be in the something, but you're not in this 144,000. Besides, you don't even know what tribe you are, no matter what you try to make up. I just wonder why we permit ourselves to make believe we're in one of these people groups. What difference does it make now? Because what we're told in the first place, if we're among the mixed multitude that invests their lot with Yahweh, we're the same as the son. And Isaiah 56 talks about greater than these people in love and care, in nurture and providence. How can you know? Well, there's kind of a way. You can't ever know. Besides, all these people that are getting their genealogy done say, oh, I've got Jewish blood. Well, 92% says it's not Jewish blood, but Khazar blood, as you know, Russian blood from way on back. You can't know. But there are some of these, like Levites, that are portrayed today in what they do. You know, the Levites were set apart. They don't own anything. They are supposed to get an inheritance from the people because they're teachers and musicians. They're supposed to get their inheritance from the people that they teach and minister to. That would be a good idea for some people that enjoy the teaching of people on radio and these kind of things to think about that when they get paid. Hey, I don't get paid anything. Except one person, two people on here give me a little. I appreciate it. I'm not hounding for money right now at all. This is the way it is. But in the church, you know, you got a salary. It was a pitiful salary. It's lower than anybody in the church, of course. And you got a house. Oftentimes you'd move in. It was full of fleas, full of hairs from dogs. There'd be manure in the closets, usually filthy, run down. And then one time I got a mansion for a parsonage, brand new, 6 bedrooms, 2 stories with an evangelist's apartment. Woo. I had told the district superintendent who was sending me up, this was outside Georgia, sending me up here when I was going to school in Emory. He said, well, you got 3 country churches here. We're going to let you work. And I said, oh, I don't need much room. Poor me. I just want to know if I have enough room for my library. Do I have to leave that behind? He said, oh, I wouldn't worry about that if I were you. And I went up into that house and, oh, had a deer park in the back. Had a big old stoop out there. That was wonderful. No, I'll tell you what, missionaries and ministers on this echelon, if they get something, it's usually some cast off. You ought to see some of the junk people send to my mother, who's a missionary. There's a story of the missionary. I'm not going to get to this. The story of a missionary woman that came and visited a church that was supporting her, but she had outrageous clothes on and outrageous jewelry. And about the second night, the brethren had to come to her and say, "Hey, we're sorry, but these clothes you're wearing, they're not appropriate for here." And she said, "Well, why aren't they? You sent them to me. I thought you wanted me to wear them." Yes, that's right. One pastor I knew, he got for his monthly salary a case of homemade chitlins, canned chitlins. One time on Pastor Appreciation Day for me, I got about a half a dozen cans of peas. I appreciate them, but how am I going to live on that? People just, we live on love, I guess. But that's what, back to Levi. That's exactly what it was for these Levites. And in this time, these people in the temple were holding back the dole for the Levites out in the country and stealing them, and they were starving to death, according to the Acts of the Apostles. Imagine that. It's easy for me to imagine. I would have probably liked the chitlins. So here we have on Mount Zion the Lamb, and with him the 144,000. And their seal is on their foreheads. Does this parallel tell you that these same ones are the army of the Messiah, are on Mount Zion during the battle and flying around in the air and being witnessed by a couple million people? They sing a new song. No one can learn that song except the 144,000 who have been redeemed from the earth. Is this the rapture? Yes, it is. Here's your rapture doctrine. Here it is. Go tell your friends. You found the rapture in Revelation. It absolutely is. But they have to die. They die of the body. But as Paul talks about, you reap. And as Yeshua talks about in John 5, you reap something new because you, as a soul, as an entire being, you can't die. You can't die. But look at the qualifications here. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women. Understand this in context of the whore of Babylon, would you? And think about what defilement is. This isn't talking about people necessarily that are having premarital sex. I mean, let's put this on the level it's meant to be put on. They are chaste. It's these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. If you're going to do that, you're going to be clean. These have been redeemed from humankind as first fruits for Elohim and the Lamb. We'll find later in Revelation that Elohim and the Lamb here end up being the same person. What does that do for your Christology? Same person, different persons. And in their mouth no lie was found, for they are spotless. Okay, you want to be in the 144,000? Here's your qualifications. Tell your Christian friends. Right here they are. But I might add, Simon, the brother of Yeshua, writes in his little book, the Didache, you do the best that you can. Coming to the big finish right here. These 144,000 Who do they correspond to in the rest of the book? Yes, the saints, the kadoshim, the set apart, the bakarim, the elect. And what happens to the saints? Oh, we're told several times that they die. Their blood is in the cup of martyrs. If it's in the cup of martyrs and they're alive, well, under the altar calling for vengeance. Then we have the rapture, and we find the saints arrayed for battle in the top of Mount Zion. Again, who are they battling? Romans? No, they're overseeing these Romans to get the job of Yahweh done, as distasteful as it can possibly be. He cries outside Jerusalem from overhead, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, but you would not. Remember, 1:7. Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, everyone who pierced him, and all tribes of the earth will wail on account of him. Even so, amen. Again, we're not talking about every eye that ever lived for all eternity. Talking about the ones that are there when he comes. And he certainly did come, as this book testifies. Are you saying he won't come again? I'm not saying anything. I am not speculating about the future. My speculations on the future are already recorded, about the millennium and how life changes and how technology is supposed to be and all that stuff. And I believe them. And I am diametrically opposed to these Luddites that think that they're going to have a millennium without technology, or that we're going to go back to Eden. It's not going to be the case, my friends. Knowledge increases. It's not a bad thing. It's whose hands it is in that counts. You want to heal everybody? You want people to be healed? Learn your pharmaceuticals. Take the money away. Find another way, another incentive. You want to know how to get up to the New Jerusalem that's hovering in the mid-heaven? You got to know about quantum. You want to talk to everybody in the world? Hey, you're going to be in a millennium as a person who is overseeing his work in a millennium. And if you can hear this, the millennium is happening now. It was happening in the past, and it will be happening in the future, because he is the Elohim who was, who is, and who is to come. In dimensional, multidimensional reality, this goes on all the time. And these people that have been saints in our life that have died, they are not dead. They're working in the millennium now, preparing a perfected earth and its people to pass over to the Father when the time comes on the 8th day, when all things are new. The earth in the millennium is full of people. And if you can hear it, we're in it now at the very beginning, as I mentioned in that lecture, 6 days to the end. We need to start. We need to get on our horse, Jessica. She's on her horse. I don't know if you are right now, but that's pretty cool. And just a reminder to end. Then I saw the sky open, and behold, a white horse. This is in 19, and it's also in 5. He who sat upon it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and he makes war. Eyes like flame of fire. On his head are many diadems, and he has a name inscribed which no one knows but himself. Clad in robes dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Logos of Elohim. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, followed him on white horses. Thank you for listening tonight. Let's see. Ooh. Your father was a music minister for the United Methodist Church. So was I. Yeah, that's right. We could have been serving Yahweh and made a living. I had to quit the ministry 3 times and go find suitable work, even though I was a full-time minister, just to catch up. Why don't people pay their ministers? All right, I'm done harping on that. Well, Allison, you've got a lot on here. And again, I appreciate you coming. Hard to get people to these things, but I hope you got something out of this tonight, at least a new perspective. And it certainly is a different perspective. Amen? Catch you next time. We're going to have 333 Club on Saturday. At 3:33, we're going to do Jubilees. Okay, soon.